how a foreigner can get free money and a residence permit from European countries, particularly Norway. This video is for women from third world countries who have married a foreigner in the West, particularly Chinese women married in Norway because of my personal experience, but still relevant to other nationalities and countries. Your reason for marrying a foreigner may well be love, but it can also be a desire to make a better life for yourself and support your family back home. Perhaps your reasons for getting married to a foreigner are a combination of these things. Things are usually not black and white, they're shades of gray. You have dark gray and very dark gray, blackish gray, and so gray that no light escapes.
Will you have this man to be your lawfully wedded husband in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish,
until permanent residence permit do you part?
And of course, all foreigners in the West are rich. And you know, in Norway, money grows on trees. Sometimes these marriages can work out okay, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the cultural differences can be quite challenging. For example, manners and eating habits. Culinary differences can occasionally be rather challenging. What is this?
This dog.
Dog?
Yeah.
Your husband may not always like the food you cook. You don't have to cook anything tonight. We're going out in the restaurant, the one you like, the expensive one. If financial problems and a strong need to acquire money to support your wretched family back home is an important reason for you marrying a foreigner, this could well be a recipe for problems in the marriage. Now, there's a lot of really stupid people here in Norway, but that's no guarantee your husband is going to think it's a good idea to use his money to win back money that you lost on the Chinese stock market. Your husband might be a control freak, discouraging any activity at all on the Chinese stock market. He might object to paying for your chronically unemployed family members' living expenses and your brother's gambling debts, hit and run, car accidents, and other criminal activities. These are just examples from personal experience. It certainly doesn't apply to all cases. The Chinese one-child policy and the preference for boys, combined with bad parenting, is a real problem. Some of these boys are totally spoiled, rotten brats, devoid of the slightest trace of empathy. It's called the Little Emperor Syndrome. You can Google it. They can come home at 4 or 5 in the morning after spending all night out partying and pound on their mother's bedroom door, asking for things like shampoo, underwear, charger for the mobile telephone, money. Wait a couple hours, put the alarm clock on when their mother gets up to go to work. No, why should they do that? Ridiculous. Your husband might not fancy the idea of guaranteeing for a visa for your 20-year-old chain-smoking, unemployed little emperor son who refuses to go to school or join the military so he can come to Norway to work illegally picking strawberries or whatever on a 3-month tourist visa. Smoking is extremely expensive in Norway, and if your husband is stingy, he might not want to support your son's chain-smoking habit to the tune of 9,000 kroner. It's about twice what a round-trip ticket to China cost. What a stingy bastard control freak that husband of yours is. So if you want to stay in Norway, you have to endure this marriage for 3 years. Your husband has to sign for your residence permit once a year for the first 3 years. If your husband refuses to sign, you have to go back where you came from. Only after 3 years do you get a permanent residence permit. After 3 years, then you can divorce the bastard and take him to court. Maybe you get half of his property and some sort of financial support. What to do if you think your husband will refuse to sign your residence permit or divorce you? You can contact the women's shelter and make false accusations about your husband abusing you. According to the Norwegian Immigration Act, Section 53, the so-called abuse provision, you can apply yourself for a residence permit if you have been abused by your husband. It's the Norwegian Immigration Act, Section 53, continuation of residence permit on an independent basis. Continuation has ceased on account of the sponsor's death. Yeah, this is also an interesting possibility. There's been some cases where foreign wives have murdered their husbands, poisoning them, setting fire to their car, etc. Maybe I'll make a video about how to murder your husband. Unless particular reasons argue against doing so, or B, cohabitation has ceased and there is reason to assume that the foreign national or any children have been abused during the cohabitation relationship. Reason to assume means that you don't have to prove a damn thing. The woman's shelter would give you advice about how to get a lawyer and a translator from your native language for free of charge. The necessity of this law is the fact that many foreign women are abused by their husbands in the most horrific and disgusting ways imaginable. Several have been murdered. For example, a 37-year-old woman from Thailand and her 10-year-old son were murdered by her Norwegian husband August 2016. She had previously been in contact with the women's shelter and the police. I read about a man who invited a bunch of friends over for a party and they all took turns raping his wife from Thailand. The women's shelter writes about cases where men lend their foreign wives out to friends because they owe them money. So this law is to protect women from the necessity of remaining in an abusive and dangerous relationship for 3 years, where they may be treated like a sex slave, threatened, physically and psychologically abused on a daily basis just to get a residence permit. Of course, they could return to their home country, but why should they? They have left their home, their job, their family, invested their time and effort in learning a new language. In 2007, of those who applied for a residence permit under the abuse provision, 83% were successful. The success rate has dropped. I don't have the data for 2016, but I'm sure it's probably less than 50%. Statistics is a very complicated science, and we must be careful about drawing conclusions, but one of the reasons for the drop in the success rate and the increase in denials could well be the greater awareness in the Norwegian Directorate of Immigration to the abuse potential in Section 53 by making false claims of abuse. False claims of abuse make it harder for women who actually are abused to get the protection they are entitled to. But if you have the moral and ethical standards of a tick, so go ahead and make false accusations. The first step is to contact the women's shelter. In Norwegian it's called Krise og Incest Center, which translates to Crisis and Incest Center. After that, you need to have an interview with the police. The good news for you is that the police usually do not contact the husband. You should avoid accusations that could result in the police contacting or prosecuting your husband. For example, anything involving threats with a firearm could very well result in the police contacting or investigating your husband. The probability is around 110%. You absolutely don't want this because it'll give your husband the opportunity to gain knowledge of your accusations and possibly defend himself. It may well be possible for him to prove that your accusations are false. If a person is actually prosecuted for a crime in Norway by the police, that person is allowed to go to the police station and read the case documents. They will usually try to make this very difficult for you. They'll pester you, "Are du ikke ferdig snart?" They would prefer that you hire a lawyer, and your lawyer can write a letter and ask for a copy of the documents. Then you can read the documents in your lawyer's office. You can expect to pay 7,000-8,000 kroner for this. So as long as there's no official police investigation, neither your husband nor his lawyer will ever be able to see any case documents. He will never be able to defend himself against your false accusations. He has no idea what you've accused him of. It's as close to a Kafka process as you can get. The average person usually doesn't have detailed knowledge about Section 53B of the Immigration Act or how this system works, so your husband's entire social network will wonder why the hell his wife, who apparently was treated so well, has found it necessary to seek protection from her husband by imprisoning herself in the women's shelter. I say imprisoning because it's a fairly secure facility with camera surveillance, and there are some fairly strict rules to abide by in the crisis or incest center. I don't think the crisis or incest center is the most fun place to be for a woman who doesn't speak the language and has a limited social network. Many of your husband's friends in college will think your husband is some sort of psychopath and treat him like pariah. Just the name crisis or incest center, sex with children, that's enough to make most men wilt like a salted slug. You apply to the UDI, the Norwegian Directorate of Immigration, for a residence permit under Section 53B. The case processing time is normally about 6 months. If UDI rejects your application, you will be given 3 weeks to appeal to the UNE, which is the Utlendingsnemnda, which is the Immigration Appeals Board. Be sure to wait just before the 3 weeks runs out before you appeal. Case processing time at the UNE could be 6 months or more. You can usually stay at the women's shelter for a month or so. The local Norwegian welfare system, NAV, in the community where you and your husband lived, is obliged to provide you with living expenses. As long as you don't move to another commune, you will be able to continue your Norwegian classes, and you may also be able to continue your internship and receive salary financed by NAV. You should go online and try to find a new boyfriend as soon as possible. 1 year after the divorce is finalized, you could get married again and maybe stay in Norway. You must avoid officially moving to another commune. NAV in your original commune will no longer be financially responsible for you. It may be difficult to get the same financial support from NAV in the new commune. I know of at least one case where a woman moved unofficially in with her boyfriend in a different commune. Using a rental contract, she got NAV in the commune where she was registered as living to give her 5,000 Norwegian kroner a month to pay for a room she never lived in. So even if UNE denies your application, you can soak the welfare system for at least a year and maybe a little more. This video is dedicated to my ex-wife, social studies teacher for native Chinese immigrants, Martha. And last but not least, some unknown individuals who gave my ex-wife some very bad advice.